The Cold War didn't begin with gunfire. It began with silence, suspicion, and a single explosion that changed everything. This is the untold story of the Cold War. Timestamp 1945, the spark at Potsdam. In July 1945, Allied leaders met in Potsdam. The war against Germany was over, but a new tension was rising. President Truman informed Stalin that the U.S. had successfully tested an atomic bomb. Stalin showed no emotion, but behind his cold expression, the nuclear arms race had begun. The Soviet Union, already developing its own nuclear program, accelerated efforts to match American capabilities. Within 4 years, the USSR detonated its first atomic bomb, shocking the West and ending U.S. nuclear monopoly. Timestamp Operation Paperclip, War of Minds. The Cold War was also a war of minds. Operation Paperclip brought over 1,600 Nazi scientists to the United States. Among them was Wernher von Braun, who would help launch the Apollo program. The Soviet Union responded with its own hunt for German expertise, recruiting scientists for their missile and space programs. Von Braun's Saturn V rocket would eventually carry astronauts to the moon, while Soviet engineers developed the R-7 rocket that launched Sputnik. These technologies, born from wartime science, became symbols of ideological supremacy. Timestamp Operation Bluebird and MKUltra. In the 1950s, the CIA launched Operation Bluebird, a precursor to the infamous Project MKUltra. These programs explored mind control, interrogation techniques, and psychological manipulation. Experiments were conducted on both willing and unwilling subjects, including prisoners, addicts, and mental patients. The goal was to develop methods to extract information from captured spies and POWs. Techniques included hypnosis, electroshock therapy, and drug-induced states. Many subjects suffered long-term psychological damage, and some died. These programs remained secret for decades, only partially declassified in the 1970s. Timestamp The Berlin Tunnel, Espionage Underground. In East Berlin, the CIA and MI6 built a secret tunnel to intercept Soviet communications. It was an espionage masterpiece. But British double agent George Blake had already informed the KGB. The tunnel became a trap, feeding false information to the West. Known as Operation Gold, the tunnel was 1,476 feet long and tapped into Soviet telephone lines. Despite its compromise, it remained operational for nearly a year, providing some genuine intelligence before the Soviets staged a discovery. Timestamp Africa, the Congo Crisis, and Lubumba. In Africa, the Cold War turned deadly. Patrice Lubumba, Congo's first elected leader, was assassinated with support from the CIA and Belgium. His crime? Seeking independence free from Western influence. The Soviet Union lost an ally, the West gained a puppet. The Congo crisis was part of a broader pattern of Cold War intervention in post-colonial states. The U.S. feared Soviet influence in Africa and supported regimes that aligned with Western interests, often at the cost of democracy and stability. Timestamp Cuba, 13 days to midnight. In October 1962, the world came seconds from nuclear war. The Soviet installation of missiles in Cuba triggered a standoff. After 13 tense days, a secret deal was struck. Missiles would be removed from Cuba and, quietly, from Turkey. The crisis was precipitated by U-2 spy plane photographs confirming Soviet missile sites. Behind closed doors, Kennedy and Khrushchev negotiated a resolution that avoided war but left both sides shaken. The hotline between Washington and Moscow was established soon after. Timestamp Oleg Leilin and Operation Lark. KGB agent Oleg Leilin defected to Britain and exposed Operation Lark, a Soviet plan to sabotage British infrastructure in case of war. His revelations led to the largest expulsion of Soviet diplomats in British history. Leilin's information revealed plans to disrupt transportation, communication, and energy systems. The UK expelled 105 Soviet officials, crippling Soviet intelligence operations in Western Europe for years. Timestamp Project Westford, Needles in Space. In the early 1960s, the U.S. launched Project Westford, deploying 480 million copper needles into orbit to create an artificial ionosphere. The goal was to ensure secure military communications in case of Soviet jamming. The needles were thinner than human hair and designed to reflect radio signals. Astronomers protested, fearing interference with space observation. The project was ultimately deemed a failure, but it highlighted the extremes of Cold War innovation. Timestamp: Reykjavik, Reagan versus Gorbachev. At the Reykjavik summit, Reagan and Gorbachev nearly agreed to eliminate all nuclear weapons. The sticking point? America's Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, a space-based missile shield. Though the summit ended without a deal, it marked a turning point. Both leaders began to see the futility of endless escalation. The groundwork was laid for the INF Treaty in 1987, which eliminated thousands of nuclear weapons. Timestamp: 1989, the wall falls. A miscommunication led to the opening of the Berlin Wall's gates. Thousands crossed into West Berlin. No shots were fired, no treaty signed. The Cold War ended with a human moment. Families reunited after decades of division. The fall of the wall symbolized the collapse of Soviet control over Eastern Europe. Within 2 years, the USSR itself dissolved, ending the Cold War era. Timestamp: Dead Hand, the Soviet doomsday device. In the 1980s, the USSR developed Dead Hand, also known as Perimeter, a nuclear control system designed to launch a retaliatory strike even if Soviet leadership was destroyed. The system used sensors and automated protocols to detect a nuclear attack. If confirmed, it would launch missiles without human input. Intended as a deterrent, Dead Hand raised fears of accidental Armageddon. Timestamp: Proxy Wars, Korea, Vietnam, Angola, Nicaragua. The Cold War wasn't always cold. Proxy wars erupted across the globe. Korea, 1950 to 1953, US and UN forces fought North Korean and Chinese troops. The war ended in stalemate, dividing the peninsula. Vietnam, 1955 to 1975, a brutal conflict where the US failed to prevent communist victory. Angola, 1975 to 2002, the US and Soviet Union backed opposing factions in a long civil war. Nicaragua, 1980s, the U.S. supported Contra rebels against the Sandinista government, leading to controversy and the Iran-Contra scandal. These wars claimed millions of lives and destabilized entire regions. Timestamp: The space race, from Sputnik to Apollo. In 1957, the USSR launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. The U.S. responded with NASA and the Apollo program, culminating in the moon landing in 1969. The race wasn't just about exploration. It was about missile technology and global prestige. Satellites became tools for surveillance, communication, and propaganda. Legacy and consequences. The Cold War shaped the modern world, creating alliances, conflicts, technologies, and fears that still linger. NATO and the Warsaw Pact defined global military alignments. The arms race led to nuclear proliferation. Espionage became institutionalized. The ideological battle between capitalism and communism influenced domestic policies, education, and media. The scars of proxy wars remain in places like Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Central America. Conclusion: this was the untold story of the Cold War, a war without bullets, but with deep scars, a war that still lives in the shadows of history.